biggest difficulty in reading lessons like this is that they aren't very positive. Well, they're positive in the sense that life ain't going to be good. And that's a hard thing to do, is to read things and try to digest things like this that tell you that life is going to change and that it's going to be, you're going to have to go through some stuff in life to get to where life becomes good. And I suspect that every one of us at one time or another has felt very much like Luke talked about in his gospel for today. You know, that we see the beautiful things around us. You know, we see the beautiful church. We see all this good stuff out here in the world. And then all of a sudden we realize that, oh, there's a war going on here, and there's a battle going on here, and there's this going on there, and that going on where, and, you know, just look in the newspapers and it just becomes kind of weighty on the shoulders. Well, I spent a lot of days and hours with Luke, and Luke and I had a lot of good conversations. Luke and I disagreed on some things, but Luke and I also agreed on some things. So make up your mind not to prepare your defense in advance. For I will give you words and wisdom that none of your opponents will be able to understand or contradict. Good words to hear. You know, if I'm going into a situation that I've been called into for whatever reason, maybe when I was working in the hospital, it was being called in to talk to a person about their impending death. Well, I always want to be prepared. So as I walk towards the room, my mind is giving a little prayer, and I'm thinking, oh, this is how I'll do it, and this is what I'll do. And you get in the room, and everything is different than you plan on. And nothing works that you thought of. Because those things will come to you as God controls our interaction with each other. And the thing that I get out of all of this is that our endurance is extremely important. And how do we endure life sometimes? It gets hard sometimes. You know, every time I feel under the weather a little bit, I begin to think, oh, I'm too old to get this kind of sick. I don't want to get this kind of sick because it might lead to something worse. Or it might lead to something better. Who knows? You know, when you get to be 80 and above, and probably a little before sometimes, you start to think about ending of life and things of that nature. And if I sat around and thought about that all the time, I would probably die tomorrow. So it's best not to think it through of how you're going to get through the next several days, weeks, years. But to go with the flow and be prepared. Take the time to talk with people like Luke. Take the time to sit down and say, for many will come in my name and say, I am he. Or they want me to, they'll say the time is near. We have to be careful. We got a lot of people that go out there and say, I speak in the name of Jesus. I speak in the name of God. I don't speak in the name of. I speak because God walks with us all. And I speak with God and with people with the understanding that if I don't care about those that I'm interacting with, if I don't have some feelings of love for those that I interact with, it's a fake thing. It's a false thing. If I can look here in this gospel and in all the lessons for today and see where all of those things that we experience in the modern time were experienced hundreds of years ago by those people in the Holy Land and around that area. So how do we really overcome all of this? I think one thing we do is we have to learn that we are not lone wolves. We can't live without others. We can't get along unless we have other people to interact with. Unless we feel a sense of community. I don't mean just interact in, hi, how you doing, type stuff. But when I walk down the street and say, how are you doing? Take the time to find out how the person's doing. Or, how's your day going? Oh, my day's going terrible. But 9 times out of 10, if somebody says, how's your day going? And I'll say, it's going fine, and that person's off down there someplace. We need to learn to be with each other and interact with each other with a sense of love and caring. Not just the words that we can say about love, not just the words we can say about our commitment to community, not just the words we can say about our relationships with other people. We have to be willing to act on those. We have to be willing to be open to those. And that is so important. It's so important. I had an interesting thing come from the bishop this week about the peace and the passing of the peace in church. Some of us like it, some of us don't like it. But anyway, somebody, I don't know who would have the time to do this, but somebody drew a drawing that looks like that. And then they say, well, for instance, we're a congregation of about 20 people, a little more than that today. And so if when we pass the peace, we interact, we want to pass the peace with every other person in the church. So if we do that, there will be 190 peaceful interactions. I bet you none of us have, I didn't think of this as the peace. I bet none of us have really thought that as we pass the peace, it's not just some words coming out, but we are actually interacting in a loving way with other people. And so 190 peaceful interactions is a lot for a church this big. It's a wonderful thing. Now, as I said, it's nice to have this data in front of me, but I have no idea how you would ever get to it. Or do I want to know how to get to it? He even gives a formula. N equals, in parentheses, n minus 1 over 2. Mm-hmm. That's almost as bad as the formula for finding Easter if you do. So the point that I try to make is that although the world tends to sometimes push in on us and make us feel defeated sometimes, or sad, or depressed, or whatever we feel, sometimes when that world pushes in on us like that, we need to learn that we are people who suffer when we are not in community with other people. Community with those who are like us or who are not like us sometimes. We need to be willing to understand that to be in a loving, caring, growing community is so important for us as the people of God, as people in general. Every one of us needs that. Even though at times we probably want to just say, I can't handle any more community. I've been community to death. But you have to get past that and understand that the community is what helps us to grow and to actually be and act out being the people of God, the loving people of God. So remember this morning when we pass the peace that it's special, it's different, it's not just greeting one another. It's greeting one another to hopefully bring some kind of a sense of peace into that interaction with the other people that you meet this morning. I think it's an exciting thing. And after reading and spending time with Luke this week, I needed all the positive stuff I could get. And thank God for this person who had the time to do this study. But it was good, and it was very good. And I think you'll be hearing some things coming out of convention this year that are going to be very exciting for every congregation and every person. I think you'll see some things that are very, very good and positive. Our speaker was fantastic. The sense of community was good. And all I can say is every time I came to sit at the table with the folks from here in Weiser, everybody wanted to sit with the folks who were here in Weiser. And I could never find a chair. Even when one was reserved for me, somebody overturned the reserve. So everybody was positive. But it was a good convention. And I think that there's going to be lots of good things happen in the church. I think the church is going to be moving in ways that we have been longing for in a long time. And I don't mean just growing in numbers, but growing in the sense of God's presence within us, God's presence around us, God's presence in community. So I think that's all good. This is one of those sermons that I can keep going if I want to. But I think I'll just say amen and quit.